Hi, welcome to the Satori software webinar, postal updates and upcoming changes and roadmap items. A few housekeeping tasks. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available within the next few days on the SatoriSoftware.com website. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a questions box. We will be collecting the questions and answering them at the end, so please feel free to enter questions at any time. We will collect them. Kim will be answering them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is currently scheduled for 60 minutes. However, in the event that we have lots of great questions coming in, we'll ask Kim to stick around for a little bit. We want to respect your time, but at the same time, want to make sure that the questions get answered. I'm Rob Perrin, the Director of Merchandising for Satori Software. I'll be your host today. Our guest is Kim Mauch. She's a postal product specialist. Kim has a decade of experience absorbing the ins and outs of effective mailing preparation and submission processes, with a heavy emphasis on new USPS technologies, including intelligent mail and electronic documentation. In Kim's current role as Postal Product Specialist for Satori Software, Kim educates customers on how to efficiently meet the latest USPS regulations. Kim has presented at MailCom, NPF, and numerous educational forums, including full-day channel training sessions, online webinars, and high-profile customer training programs. For our agenda today, Kim will be talking about summer Postal One releases, monthly data updates, eInduction, seamless acceptance, new invoicing procedures, and trans-hub facilities. Hi, Kim. How are you?
Hi, Rob. Great. Thanks, everyone, for coming to the training session today. We do have quite a bit of stuff to cover. We're going to talk a lot about the upcoming changes that are happening on the post office side and kind of how those are going to be impacting your business here. So once we can get the slides advanced here, we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing that we should probably talk about is the summer Postal One release. So if you're using electronic documentation today, you're very familiar with Postal One. It's the system that the post office uses to track all of your postage statements, your mail pieces that are being sent using full service IMB, and all of that good kind of stuff. So so what's going to happen is the post office is going to be updating Postal One at the end of August. So originally, the post office had scheduled that for the end of July, and they actually changed that because there were some outside systems outside of Postal One that that were not able to be updated in time for that update. So, so what the post office did is they actually delayed the release of Postal. And so what's going to happen is here on August 24th, USPS will be into production. And so August 24th, the actual will be represented until we get to September 7th. So there's actually a 2-week kind of a rollover period. During those 2 weeks is the post office will accept both new and old versions of electronic documentation. So what will happen is there will be a couple new versions of electronic documentation that will be all for mail.dat. They will start supporting 14-2. This is a new version of mail.dat, and in this version is to be streamlining the mail.dat format. So what'll happen is the post office actually determined that there were several fields in mail.dat that were actually not being used either by Postal One or by the mailing industry at large. There were actually quite a few fields that were available there that were kind of intended for international mailing and things like that. And what they did was they decided to instead just completely remove those fields because there wasn't really an indication that those fields would be used in the future. So, that'll be a new that'll be acceptable as soon as that 24th rollout happens. Be able to use that new version until the September 7th date. So if you submit your mailings ahead of time, you'll be able to mailings for September 7th and after, but you'll be able to submit them early if you prepare them early and ahead of time there. In addition to the mail.dat changes, there's also a new version of mail.xml. So if you're familiar with mail.xml, it's a different way of being able to submit your electronic documentation. So rather than being a flat file, it's actually a series of that communicate with Postal One. And there's a new version of that that actually corresponds to all of those different changes that were made for 14-2 in mail.dat. So along with that, along with just the electronic documentation standards that are changing, updating the postage statements. So this is if you are actually physically printing out your postage statements today and taking them in rather than using electronic documentation, those are actually going to be updated as well. So you'll see at the bottom of your postage statements, you'll see a new September 2014 date at the bottom of your postage statements that you'll need to be using for your mailing starting on September 7th. And so you'll want to make sure that you have your software updated that will create both your electronic documentation and your new paper postage statements. There are a couple things that are outside of just the postage statements that are going to change, and one of the big focuses is going to be the Intelligent Mail Package Barcode, or the IMPB thresholds. So if you're sending packages today, you are required to apply an Intelligent Mail Package Barcode, or an IMPB, to that to those mail pieces, and also the documentation in an electronic format. So usually you can use this file or the SSF file, or you can also use a mail.dat file for many classes that support packages. And so previously the post office, as far as how much of the mail would need to be prepared in that fashion, because these are some new standards that were just introduced this year. They are going to be ramping up the thresholds for the IMPB starting here with this Postal One release. So what's going to happen is first of all, for your unique barcodes, so for the IMPB itself, that barcode. And starting in September, you'll need to make sure that at least 99% sending using the IMPB. So you'll need to make sure that those are unique across all of your mailings, not just within a specific. Also, the new threshold for those that are not corrected. So the post office is finding that, especially with with the delivery point information and the ZIP+4 information, that they really would expect for those pieces. That makes it much easier for the post office to route them. And so what they're requiring is that if you are sending one of these uncorrected addresses, you'll need to include either a ZIP+4 or the actual address itself in the electronic documentation, so the post office can actually route that information appropriately within their network. So starting here in September, you'll need to make sure that at least 95% of the pieces do include that information in the electronic documentation. Requirement that they're going to start having is going to be that for all of your pieces, they are going to need to use that shipping services file or mail.dat to submit them, and you'll need to make sure that 95% or more of those pieces are actually represented in electronic documentation. Those are also new thresholds that are going to be starting here with the summer Postal One release.
Kim, can I jump in here for a moment?
Yes, thanks, Rob.
It appears that you're having some difficulty with your audio. I'm going to grab you and pull you into our other studio, and we'll have you use this microphone.
All right, I'll be right over.
Sorry, folks. Hang with us just a moment.
Okay, everyone, sorry about that. I hope that the audio is a little bit better now that I'm back in the studio here. So let's talk a little bit more about the new Postal One functionality that's available starting with this release that's going to start on August 24th. One of the new features that they're going to be adding for Postal One is they are going to be creating an electronic version of the periodicals Form 3526. And this is a form that that periodical mailers need to fill out in order to show their eligibility for periodical mail. So the nice thing about this is it is going to be all electronic now, so you won't have to manually fill out those forms anymore, and you'll be able to do that all automatically online using the Business Customer Gateway. Another thing that they're going to be doing that also relates to parcel mail is they are going to be adding support for mail.dat rather than just the shipping services file to several new classes of mail. So that's going to include standard mail, parcel select, including parcel select lightweight, and all of the priority mail parcel options that were previously not supported. So if you have not already adopted the shipping services file format for parcels and you're already very comfortable with the mail.dat format, you'll actually be able to use that for your parcel mailings starting with this August 24th update. Another big feature that's going to be activated starting with this Postal One update is going to be some invoicing metrics. And that's a very small term for what's actually a very big change in the way that the post office is operating. So basically what's happening is the post office is going to start invoicing customers for errors that they see with full service processing, and also for any move update changes and things like that. And we'll talk about that in just a few more minutes. But basically what will happen is starting with this September 7th update, the post office is going to start calculating your errors for full service. And you'll be able to see those on the Business Customer Gateway through a tool called the Mailer Scorecard. And you'll want to make sure that you're monitoring that mailer scorecard to make sure that you're above the thresholds to ensure that you do not receive any of these additional invoices for your mail after you've already submitted. And another feature that is a long time coming that is going to be activated for Postal One is they are going to activate the flags in electronic documentation for political and election mail. And so for one of the requirements that the post office has is that you actually identify which mailings actually contain political mail or election mail, and you'll be able to flag those inside of your electronic documentation, and those will show up on your postage statements. Another change that's going to be coming up very soon is going to be this idea of monthly pre-sort data updates. So your pre-sort data, we've already talked about that in previous webinars and also some of our Insight videos. But basically, this is the information that drives your pre-sort. These are the labeling lists and the mail direction file that tell your pre-sort engines how to sort the mail, where these SCFs are and what areas they service, and where you're eligible for your postal discounts. Now, for this pre-sort data, the post office is actually going to be migrating to a monthly update of this data, starting with the September data. The September data is actually going to be published in August, and you'll be able to start preparing mailings starting on September 1st. And one of the issues that we're seeing with this is actually with the previous schedule, we've actually seen quite a bit of errors that have been coming through with this pre-sort data. So we're hoping that they'll have all of those addressed prior to the publishment of this September data. And you'll want to make sure that you apply any and all updates from your software provider to make sure that you do have the most current data, as you will have some problems at acceptance if you're using old data that routes your mailings incorrectly. So you'll see at the bottom of this slide here there are a list of all the different releases that are coming up here. So basically what's going to happen with this monthly schedule is there's going to be a month of what we call a notification period. So this is a time where you could prepare mailings for the upcoming month, but you wouldn't actually be able to use that data during that month. Then as soon as that file becomes active, you actually have 2 months where you can actually use that data to prepare your mailings. And then after those 2 months, you'll definitely need to migrate to the next one. We always suggest that you use the current data files that are available, because that's going to have the most current sorting and discount information that's possible. Now the post office and the mail service, the mailing vendors, the software vendors like Satori software, have agreed that as soon as this data is published and it's correct, that we will be publishing this data as quickly as possible. So we'll want to so you'll want to make sure that at the beginning of each month you look for one of these updates. So we'll get the data on August 1st, and we'll make sure to publish that for you if there are no errors as quickly as we can, and usually you'll see an update around the second week of the month. There are a couple other services that the post office is starting to introduce that will be kind of ramping up over the fall season here. The first is going to be eInduction. So eInduction is actually a way for you to eliminate the need for your 8125. So if you're a dropship mailer and you're tired of having to manage all of these individual 8125s and making sure they're approved and that nothing changes between the time that you verify the mail and the time that it's inducted at the dropship facility, eInduction is probably going to be your best friend. It's a really good way of being able to eliminate that paperwork. It eliminates all of the signatures and all of those things. And basically what happens is all that information that's currently on the 8125 is included in your electronic documentation instead. And so what will happen is, rather than having that problem and at the getting the mail accepted and getting everything from acceptance to actual mail drop, what will happen is the post office will actually scan your barcodes at the induction site, and it'll know automatically based on your electronic documentation whether they should accept that mail. And so it's a very, very streamlined process for being able to drop ship your mail. Then the post office is going to be ramping up some of the features for eInduction. It has been in place for a while. There are about 50 mailers right now that are doing the pilot program for eInduction, and what the customers that we've talked to that are using this service are very impressed. They find it very easy. Really, the only difficulty is explaining it to the actual postal clerks at the dropship facilities. And there are some logistics providers who haven't gotten quite on the bandwagon yet, but this is a great new feature. The post office is going to be adding here in the fall some new reporting options and new ways that you can schedule those dropship appointments, because there is a requirement that you schedule everything in fast for all of your eInduction appointments. Now, one of the kind of the drawbacks with eInduction is initially you did need to associate your electronic documentation specifically with your fast appointment. They actually dropped this requirement, and they have not announced a date when that will be required. So you'll still be able to use the induction without associating your containers and your appointments to your electronic documentation. And the post office is using the rest of this year to kind of firm up all of the other little issues that they're seeing here, and they're hoping to roll this out nationwide very soon. So next, let's talk a little bit about seamless acceptance. And seamless acceptance and eInduction kind of go hand in hand. The eInduction is the gateway to seamless acceptance. And basically what seamless acceptance does is it removes that verification step. That first step that you go and you take your mail into the acceptance office, they run a sample of your mailing on Merlin, and then based on the results of that, your mail is either accepted or it's denied. And it's a very subjective piece, and it's also prone to some errors. So if you have a problem in only one of your trays and that's the one that gets selected for running on Merlin, then your entire mailing can be held up, and you're losing time and money waiting for this verification step. Seamless acceptance actually removes that step before the mail gets into the mail stream. So rather than using the information from the samples, it actually starts processing the mail directly on the mail sorting equipment at the post office. And the results of that will actually determine what happens to your mail. So right now there won't be any assessments. There's going to be no charges for any errors using seamless acceptance, but it will be a feature that's available and that will eliminate that verification step, and hopefully get a lot more mail traveling through the system very quickly. Now, one of the changes that they are doing is starting this fall, any of the mailers who are using drop shipment and also mailing over 90% of their mail as full service mail, they are going to be turning those mailers on automatically for seamless acceptance in parallel mode starting in October. So basically in that case you would be able to you'll be able to continue to use your paper postage statements and all of that kind of stuff. You'll be able to use the current processes that you have today, but if you're interested in seamless acceptance, you can start using those tools in what they call a parallel mode. So you'll be able to use both the old process and the new process at the same time. And basically what that'll do is that'll allow you to give it a test drive to see if seamless acceptance is something that works well for you, and correct any errors that you may see if there are any, and then you'll be able to migrate to seamless acceptance as soon as that's available. So I talked a little bit about assessments for seamless. Let's talk a little bit about assessments for mail in general. So this is actually a hot topic that's going to be a little bit more visible starting with this Postal One update, because with this Postal One update, they're going to start showing you more and more information about the errors that are happening inside of your mailings, and also showing you what your charges would be if you start getting these things wrong going on for perpetuity. So what's going to happen is the post office is going to start turning on the reports for mail invoicing. And this is specific to full service mail. So if you're a full service mailer today, you'll be able to access these reports. You'll be able to take a look at your mailings and make sure that you're adhering to the standards that are set for full service. And starting with October, you'll be able to start seeing what those results are, the full set of reports that are available, and start monitoring it and making any corrections to your mailings to start eliminating some of those errors. Because starting in January, the post office is going to start invoicing any customers that are not adhering to the standards. So there are some thresholds that are set for full service, and any mailers who are over those thresholds will start getting assessed. Now, all of this information is on your mailer scorecard. You can access that scorecard today by going to gateway.usps.com, logging into the Business Customer Gateway, and there's a whole section for mailing reports. You'll want that mailer scorecard. So let's take a look at what the thresholds are for full service. So most of these thresholds are going to be going to apply to most mailings. So your service type ID, the mailer ID that's in your barcode, making sure that your barcodes are unique and that you have your tray barcodes and your pallet barcodes correct and unique. Those you'll need to make sure that no more than 2% of your mailings have errors, or 2% of your mail pieces have errors when it comes to those features. However, there is some additional information that you have a little bit more leeway with, and that's going to be your by for information. If you're doing co-palletization, you'll need to make sure to include your OCI file in your mail.dat, and then also you need to make sure that your entry facility is correct. Now, the post office did an evaluation of all the mail that's in full service today to see what exactly the current thresholds are, like what's actually happening with the mail that's in full service today. And they found that just about every single mailer is doing way better than these thresholds. So they're doing really well, and most mailers are not going to have any problem with any of these thresholds. The one that is probably the trickiest is that by for information. So you do need to make sure that your mailer ID and your customer registration ID, your CRID, are correct inside of your electronic documentation, because that is probably the biggest source of errors that the post office is seeing for full service today. Now, there is another invoice that's going to start up here starting in the fall. They haven't announced exactly what date it is. However, and some of the details are still getting fleshed out. However, the post office is proposing in this effort to get rid of Merlin, because they really don't like this idea of just doing a sample process for checking the mail. They're actually proposing that they migrate from this sampling process to verify your move update processing to what they're calling a census test. So rather than just taking a couple of trays of your mail and validating that and using that information to calculate any errors that you have and charge you for those, what they've decided to do is start using the mail processing equipment already, so that they already have. So they would take that in, all of your mail, start putting it on the processing equipment, use a system called PARS, which is their internal forwarding system, to verify that all of the mail that's in your mailing, so this is all your mail, not just that sample, is actually validated. And it's going to take a census of all the mail that you send over a calendar month. So rather than just taking a couple trays at a time and assessing you on a mailing by mailing basis, it'll average everything across an entire calendar month. And if you have if you have move update errors that are over 0.8%, and this is just for your full service pieces, then you would be assessed for that move update compliance issue. Now, the one thing that they will get you on is, previously you would just have that 7-cent charge per piece over the threshold. Now, for this, what will happen is the difference between your error and the error threshold, if you're over 0.8%, anything over 8.8%, those pieces will actually bump up to a single piece rate. So you'll actually have a pretty significant jump in the postage for those pieces. Now, this is still kind of getting worked through a couple of different work groups through MTAC and things like that. So so nothing official has gone out about this already yet, but it is something to be aware of. You'll want to make sure that you are complying with all of the move update processes that exist today, to make sure that you don't get assessed, because the jump between your pre-sort discounts and that single piece rate is pretty significant. So I wanted to show you here where you can find the mailer scorecard. So if you log into the Business Customer Gateway and then you click on the Mailing Reports link there on the main page there, you'll see the mailer scorecard on the right side of the screen. You'll just click on that and you'll be able to see how you're doing, as opposed to all of those different thresholds that they're measuring, to see exactly how you're sitting, make sure that those are well above the thresholds that they've set, and if you do see any errors, you'll have a chance to correct them. So let's talk a little bit more about full service. There are a couple things that they're proposing for full service starting in October. The first is they are proposing that you would be able to get free ACS for all of your pieces that are attached to a full service mailing, and not just the full service pieces themselves. So one of the main benefits of full service is you do get this free ACS data back for your full service pieces. They're actually proposing that they're going to extend that to any of your mailings or any of your pieces that are associated with a full service mailing. So any of your residual mail that's not considered automation, you would get that ACS data as well, but you will need to be mailing at least 75% of your mail as full service. Also, another thing that's going to change is if you have a detached mail unit. So if you have a postal clerk that comes on site to do the verifications, if you are not doing full service today and you're not 75% or more doing full service, they're actually going to start reevaluating your DMU contract. And again, this is part of this push to get everyone on board for full service. There's still no new mandate for exactly when that's going to be required for automation prices, but they are pushing the industry towards full service by doing things like reevaluating contracts and stuff like that. There are a couple sites actually that are starting to require electronic documentation, which is a key part of full service. And so you'll want to make sure that that even if you're not doing full service today, you should probably start looking at electronic documentation just as that first step, and to make sure that as they roll out this electronic documentation requirement that that you're not caught behind the 8 ball, that you're ready to start using eDoc right away. So another thing that we had as something we wanted to talk about for this webinar that's actually been pushed out significantly is this idea of what they're calling a trans hub. And these hubs are going to be a new type of mail entry facility that will be available here at the end of the year, probably January or February of 2015. So just for a little bit of context, last year and the year before, the post office went through a very significant network rationalization process, and they closed several facilities, like hundreds of facilities. And basically those facilities right now have either been sold or they're pretty much sitting empty. There's not much going on there. And the post office is actually proposing to consolidate or to eliminate an additional 82 facilities across the country. Most of these facilities were SCFs. Now they've had a process in place it's been kind of an ad hoc process where if you had previously entered your mail at this SCF, you could continue to drop your mail there and continue to get the SCF discounts for dropping your mail at that location, even though there's no actual processing that's going on there and it's not an official SCF. Now what the hubs are going to do is that's going to replace that kind of ad hoc process with something more official. So what's going to happen is a lot of these old SCF sites are going to be converted to what they're calling the trans hub. And basically what these are cross-dock facilities. This is where you'll enter your mail. Nothing's going to come off of a pallet. They're not going to take any mail out of trays or anything like that, but they're just going to take the mail that's entered at that hub and they'll cross-dock it either all the way down to the delivery unit or back up to an SCF place where they'll actually do the sortation of the mail. There are quite a few different details that are still being worked out as far as whether there's a separate discount for hubs versus SCFs, whether you get your SCF discount at that location. But there is going to be a trial that's going to start here in November just to test out all of this information to make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row as far as what's actually going to happen. And then the earliest that this will roll out will probably be around February of next year. But it is important to note that if you are using that optional process for SCFs today, so if you're sending your mail to one of those old SCF destinations that's no longer an SCF, you will want to make sure that you're aware that those SCF discounts will be going away in January at those SCFs that have been consolidated. So so you may want to be aware of what's happening with these hubs, because that might be your replacement for those SCF discounts. So let's talk a little bit about what to do next. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you are constantly updating your software, especially with those monthly pre-sort data file updates. You're going to want to make sure that you have the most current data updated. Different software packages are updating the data in different ways, so you'll want to make sure that that you're updating in a way that makes sense for that software. So make sure you're aware of how they're managing those monthly updates, and you'll want to make sure that you're doing that in a way that makes sense for your mailings. Another thing is starting in October, definitely start monitoring your mailer scorecard. So your mailer scorecard is going to be your key to making sure that you're not getting any of those invoices, either for full service errors or for your move update errors. If you haven't already, start moving towards electronic documentation. We still don't know when full service will be required, but it is definitely on the horizon, and it's better to be prepared. So if you're not already on electronic documentation, start moving towards it right away. And the other thing is if you do mail to SCFs, you want to review the facility closure list. That's available on the USPS website, USPS.com. Just search for network rationalization, and there'll be a full list of what they're proposing for those facility closures to see if your local area, if any of the facilities that you use are going to be affected. So at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and start the Q&A here, and it looks like we've got quite a few questions that have been coming in, and we'll want to make sure that we get as many of those answered as we possibly can here. So let's take a look at the questions that are coming in. So the first one is, what kind of things should we be looking for on our scorecard? And that's a great question. What you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that that you're looking at all of those thresholds that I outlined as part of that full service list. So you're going to want to make sure that you're using a correct mailer ID, that you're using unique barcodes, that you have the by for information, and compare the results of your scorecard to the thresholds. And those are the key areas that you're going to want to concentrate on. Any of the errors that are over a threshold will be highlighted on your mailer scorecard. So if you see anything that's highlighted, you're going to definitely want to pay attention to that, see what the problems are, and see if you can correct them. Okay, the next one is if we do find an error on our scorecard and it is determined that the errors are incorrect, does the post office have a process in place to fix the errors so our scorecard is not negatively impacted? And yes, that's a great question. So what the post office does is they actually have a period of time where when they're actually starting to use these invoices, you'll have a way of being able to challenge any of the invoices that you have coming to you. So for example, if you find that that it's consistently saying that you have your barcodes are not unique, but you know that they are because you've been keeping track and everything seems to be just fine, and maybe it's a scanning system on the post office side, you do have a mechanism where you can challenge that, and that's actually part of the invoicing feature on the Business Customer Gateway. So what you'll be able to do starting in October is you'll start to be able to look at what those invoices would be, and you'll see that there's going to be a link there where you can actually dispute those charges. And so you'll want to do that, and you'll want to work with your BMEUs and your acceptance clerks to make sure that that's working well as well. Next question is, should you be at full service before the September update? Well, I would say, should you? Yes. Are you required to? No. There is no new date as far as when full service will be required, but even though there's not a new date, we know that this is going to be coming. So it's just best practice to start moving towards it now. If you haven't already, feel free to start moving towards that. If you have any questions about how to move to full service, definitely let us know. We have several tools that are available to help you through that process. And like I said, the sooner the better, the more prepared you are, the easier it's going to be once they do mandate full service. Next question is the move update invoicing related to any UAA mail? Because many times NCOA will not always find UAA mail. And move update and UAA are linked, but they're not. It's not a causation thing, right? Yeah, move update does not prevent UAA mail; it just limits it. And so there has been this mandate of doing your move update processes every 95 or at least 95 days before you mail or less, and that's been in place for a very, very long time. If you go over the thresholds that are set today, then you do get charged extra for your mail that is not compliant with move update. So that part hasn't changed. It's just how they're measuring and what the thresholds are. That's really the only change that's happening there. Like I said, move update does not eliminate UAA, it just limits it. So you will need to still continue to do your outside processes to try and eliminate UAA as much as possible. But this is basically eliminating that forwarding step from the post office side. The next question is, does the by for requirement with the USPS error if the mail owner contact name is the same as the mailing agent contact name? I'm seeing 98% failure for my full service due to by for, and according to my Satori setup, everything is set up correctly. I include my name as the contact, but provide my customer's address. So the by for information actually uses your mailer ID and your CRID, not the actual contact information that's in your eDoc. So one of the things that you might do is if you're a mail service provider, you may want to contact your BMEU to see exactly what you need to do, but it may mean that you need to be turned on as being a self-mailer as well. So if you're a mail service provider and you also provide services for your customers, you want to make sure that you're identifying your customer, but also you might do mailings for yourself. So in those cases, you want to be turned on. There's a special flag that's set up for your account that you can't turn on yourself, so you'll have to contact the Postal One help desk for that. But they'll be able to turn it on that you actually do mailings for yourself, and that may eliminate some of your errors. If that's not going to eliminate your errors, then you might want to contact Satori or contact the Postal One help desk to see exactly where those errors are happening. The next question is, where do I get a list of closing facilities? That's available on the USPS website. If you go to USPS.com and search for network rationalization, there will be there's some information in the news section there that actually shows all of the facilities. There's a big long spreadsheet of all 82 facilities that are being considered. The next question is, how do you access the mailer scorecard? That's available through the Business Customer Gateway. If you go to gateway.usps.com and log into your account there, you'll be able to see a link there for your mailing reports. And once you go into the mailing reports section, you'll see a link for your mailer scorecard. Who do we talk to if we see errors with the mailer scorecard? Our BMEU knows nothing about this type of information. If your BMEU is not being helpful, then I would definitely suggest either contacting Satori or the USPS help desk. So if you contact the main USPS help desk, they would be able to help you with that as well. Next question, by for, does this mean we need to fill out all 3 boxes of the postage statement, even if under 10,000 pieces? And the answer for that is yes. You will need you will be required to fill out the by for information for all of your mailings that are full service. The next question, will there be a webinar on the scorecards? Yes, actually we do have that planned. That's going to be later in the fall here when some of the the information is available about the scorecards, because they are going to be drastically revised for their October update, and we will be having a webinar in October that will go over those scorecards, show you the invoicing information, and help you to triage that and make sure that you're not getting charged. The next question, what is the charge in the invoices for the errors in the scorecard? If you're doing full service, what will happen is you'll actually be charged the difference between your automation rate and your full service rate. So basically you would be losing your full service discount. So for now, those invoices are going to be pretty small. However, if they do decide with the pricing change in 2015 to change the way that they price for full service versus versus automation, then that will change pretty significantly. For now, those invoices won't be too bad. The next question, let's see. How do we get specific information on what is causing the errors in our scorecard? Again, that would be something that I would suggest contacting Satori and or the USPS help desk to get information about that. We're not using the scorecard. Where would we find the ACE login ID? And I'm not sure I understand that question. If you're using ACE, that's a different product. So we'll want to make sure, we might want to contact us offline to see exactly what you need there. The next question is, what does seamless acceptance jobs not auto-finalized mean? So seamless acceptance is a way for you to automatically finalize your postage statements without having an acceptance clerk actually doing that finalization. So basically, as soon as your containers are scanned at the acceptance facility, then basically your postage statement would be finalized automatically rather than having a clerk having to push a button to do that. So when it's saying that it's not being auto-finalized, I believe that's an error that they're going to be correcting. Next one, what are the outside steps for UAA mail you're referring to? So there are many different techniques that you can use to limit your undeliverable as addressed mail or your UAA mail. And of course, you'll definitely want to make sure you're running through your CASP certified software. You're going to want to make sure you're running NCOA. It's also a best practice if you get ACS data to update your data based on the ACS results. But there are some outside services that you can use also to better increase the quality of your mail. So we have several data services that are available, some outside change of address services. Feel free to contact your support or your sales rep here at Satori for additional information about that. We also have quite a bit of information about UAA mail available on our blog, so feel free to log in there and take a look. There are quite a few different ways that you can limit that UAA mail. You can never eliminate it, you can just limit it, but we'd have several different practices that we recommend for customers to limit that. See, we started using full service and have been watching our scorecard. We're receiving a seamless error. Jobs not auto-finalized. I've talked to the Postal One and we are not listed as seamless. Is this a known error? It might be that even though you're getting so this is one of the problems where the post office's systems aren't really talking to each other very well, which is part of why that Postal One update is being delayed, is they're actually updating the outside of Postal One systems. And I believe Seamless is one of those. And so one of the things is you will want to contact the post office to see if you are turned on for Seamless, because you probably aren't. And it seems like from the question that you're asking here. And if you do want to try out Seamless, you should contact them and let them know so they can turn you on. They haven't actually turned everyone on yet. And but if you are getting an error, you'll want to make sure that you use both your resources at the post office and also here at Satori to try and get those errors figured out and address them. Let's see here. How do we submit the postal paperwork electronically? That's actually, I could cover about 2 hours to do that. There are several ways that you can do electronic documentation. We have several webinars that we've done specifically about electronic documentation. I strongly recommend that you take a look at those. Those are all available on our website. If you go to the webinar section, there's a list of all of our recorded webinars, and we have several about electronic documentation that you'll be able to view. The next question, why would we want to process at full service if there are possible penalty invoices? I wish I could answer that. This is something that the post office has been struggling with. They've been trying to get everyone to adopt full service, but they're still holding this stick at the end saying, but if you don't do it right, we're going to charge you. And that's not very cool. So the only reason that I would suggest that you start migrating towards full service, even if you don't actually do all of the steps for full service, if you do everything but that final discount, you can be ready for when it's going to be mandated, because even though there's not a date today, there is going to be a date where they are going to mandate full service if you want automation discounts, and that's going to be the difference of several pennies per piece difference between automation and non-automation rates. So even if you don't actually turn yourself on for full service, make sure that you have all the steps in place and all the processes in place at your facility to make sure that you're ready for that when they do mandate it. I can completely understand your hesitation, and I share your concern, because these penalty invoices are not sending the right message. The next question, what is the advantage of seamless acceptance? As a first-class mailer, why do I care if it's accepted by a clerk or automatically? And for a first-class mailer, I don't see that there is a whole ton of benefit for seamless acceptance. It's primarily for those dropship mailers, which are generally your periodical and standard mailers. However, it can streamline some of your processes. At this point, there's no indication that seamless will ever be required, so I don't think that you need to investigate that if you don't see any value in it. The next question, what is a DPV error, and shouldn't that be corrected through Satori's address correction? So a DPV error, this goes back to that UAA mail question. Now DPV is delivery point validation, and as far as what the CAS engine and what the DPV engines do from the software standpoint is we just validate the data that you give us versus the data that the post office gives us. And there are only so many changes that the post office that we can make in order to stay CAS compliant to that address in order to correct it to a valid address. So for example, if you put in an address of 104 Main Street and there's no building at 104 on Main Street in that town, we don't know from that information whether that address actually physically exists or if there's a typo, maybe it's 704. There are all these different things that can change the way that DPV is run, and we're not going to change that just on a whim. We don't have enough information, so that's why we return the error rather than changing your address to an incorrect address. The next question, are there any penalties for bad addresses mailing out? Those are kind of self-inflicted. So basically what happens there is those mail pieces will probably go into a recycle bin if you're using standard mail, or if you're doing first-class mail, they'll make a valiant attempt to send them, but basically you're wasting materials and postage on bad addresses. The next question, can you comment on the requirement of ghost numbers for nonprofits when using electronic documentation? This is only a requirement if it seems when the nonprofit has a permit imprint but is not using it for the current mailing. So for nonprofits, the post office right now does require that you have a ghost number so that they can connect your permit account to the nonprofit authorization. Now the post office has said that they will be changing this, so rather than requiring a ghost number to attach the nonprofit to your account there, they'll actually start using the customer registration ID, or the CRID. Now, this has not been a perfect process in the past. They've gone through this several times where they've tried to migrate this from a ghost number to a CRID. I've heard that they might fix this in October. I'm thinking it'll probably wind up happening January of next year. It keeps getting pushed out. They've been having these problems with ghost numbers for quite a while. So right now you definitely want to continue to use those ghost numbers. The next question, by 4, do we need to fill out all 3 boxes even if the permit holder is the mail owner? And in that case, no. So you would be able to just identify yourself as the mail owner, and you wouldn't need to identify the other 3 boxes because you're not a mailing agent, you're mailing for yourself. And I think that's about all the questions that we have. We're going to go ahead and close up here. If we do wind up with any additional questions here at the end, we'll go ahead and send you those answers offline. So if you continue to have any questions, feel free to send them in, and we'll make sure that those get answered offline. And then I'll go ahead and hand this back to Rob.
Thanks, Kim. Super informative. Lots of good questions, too. Thank you for attending the Satori Software webinar, Postal Update, Upcoming Changes, and Roadmap Items. It certainly sounds like there's a lot of them coming up.
Indeed.
Today we have been talking with Kim Mauch, Postal Product Specialist for Satori Software. Thank you very much, Kim.
Thanks,
That's excellent. Coming up on August 20th at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, Satori Software will be presenting another webinar titled Mail Movers on Post Presort Software, an Insurance Policy Mailer's Need. We'd like to invite you to join us for that. Once again, that's August 20th at 11 a.m. Thank you again for joining us for this webinar. Please take a moment to complete our short survey at the close of this webinar. That way we can continue to improve this program and cover topics that you want to hear about. This webinar has been recorded and will be available on the satorisoftware.com within the next few days. And this webinar has been produced by Jerisa Chang. For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin, Director of Merchandising. Once again, thank you for attending our webinar, and we wish you smooth mailing ahead. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Rob.